What's the worst case of rich kid syndrome you've seen? I've posted this before, and I need to say first off the bat that this is about my best friend and she is the best person I know, i.e. not normally rich kid or anything. I was complaining about how I was short on money one month, just couldn't go out to eat, because I had to pay rent and pay for tag renewal all in the same paycheck. She looked at me, super seriously, and was like, don't worry, they send you those in the mail for free. After a long discussion she learned that in fact, her mom had been paying for her new tags every year. I worked as a bouncer at a high-end nightclub, the biggest boner of a rich kid, straight out of Malibu's Most Wanted, gets a VIP booth and bottle service, racks up a massive bill trying to act like a baller. His credit card gets denied and he has to call his dad to come down at 1:30 AM because he can't order any more bottles. His dad comes down in his pajamas, obviously ashamed and furious at this douche of a kid. Ends up embarrassing the crap out of his kid in front of his whole group of friends. He takes the kid's keys and is about to leave when his kid makes some crappy comment and goes back in the club. The dad's about to walk away after he apologizes for his son when we offer to drag him out the rough way. He smiles and accepts. That kid hit every door and step on the way out. Not the best story, but was one of the most satisfying experiences working at that club. Don't know if it qualifies as rich kid syndrome, but when I got out of the Navy I decided to use my GI Bill at one of the Penn State satellites. I was sitting in the cafeteria drinking coffee and typing up a paper when a girl sits down across from me and opens her backpack. She pulls out a sandwich bag and looks at it in disgust, then looks me dead in the eye and says, I don't even know why I bother, my mother never cuts off the crust. I let out one of those high-pitched short laughs like, is this girl for real? Oblivious to the tone of it, she says, I know right, then asks me if I want it. I looked around thinking I was getting pranked or something cause this crap is too stereotypical to be real and I just assumed I was being filmed. She shook it at me and gave me a well look. So I said frick it and took the sandwich. She then pulled out her student id card and bought a crap ton of french fries. That sandwich was awesome. I think the bread was homemade and it was stacked like a dagwood. It had all kinds of expensive looking meats and Dijon mustard. Serious gourmet crap. I know this girl's mother will never see this, but I just wanna say someone appreciated that sandwich. Stacked like a dagwood. You, so madam, have a respectable knowledge of sandwiches and comics. This case isn't too bad, and it's a bit funny. I became friends with a kid whose family was really well off. He was a really nice bloke, but a bit sheltered, and university was the first time he really had any independence, but he had very little sense of what the value of a dollar really was since his folks got him what he usually wanted, compared to what normal people would spend. There was one particular time he wanted us to eat at a restaurant, and he assured us it's really good, so we all rocked up to this place and the price for main courses started at $40 to $60. Which as poor uni students we couldn't afford. But when he realized this he was so embarrassed. He's finally wised up a few years later once he got more independent away from his family and made his own money, and remains one of the best blokes I know. In high school a kid was bragging that he got in his third fender bender in his old car, 3 years old, that his parents gave him but he hated, so his parents were buying him an entirely new, current year, car to incentivize him to drive better. My mom's friend used to buy new clothes each season and throw out the old ones. She had to be taught by her husband to save them for the next year. Worked with this kid who was a good kid, but completely disconnected from financial reality for most people. He'd just moved out west from another state and was trying to get on like a normal adult. He went to buy a new car and was shocked that they couldn't just bill his dad for it, since they didn't know him. He ordered a bottle of wine at a restaurant and the sommelier said certainly. So then the sommelier whispered, just for your knowledge, sir, the bottle is $700. He looked straight at him and asked, is that a lot? The sommelier honestly didn't know how to answer. Good kid, and he got a lot better, but he just didn't know. Once he casually told his mom he needed some help with bills and she deposited $20,000 into his account. A guy looked at my $2,000 beta car in college and commented that it must have been really cheap and guessed $15,000. LOL, I'd have offered to sell it to him as a demolition car or something for that price. I worked at a Starbucks and we hired a new guy, who I was training. At one point, I had to show him how to clean the restrooms. I grab the bleach and hand him a pair of gloves and he looks at me in disgust and says, "We don't have a maid to clean the bathrooms?" He quit the next day, lol. When I was in boarding school, one of my co-boarders handed me some mail saying, "Do you notice anything special about this envelope?" When I checked it out, I realized his face was on the stamp. He was royalty. Went to a destination wedding in Mexico resort. Rich kids rented a golf cart, tore through the streets and flipped the cart, injuring people and causing a huge commotion and traffic jam. A Mexican lady comes out and begins to scold them for their behavior. "You wouldn't act this way at home." Rich kid responds, "I promise you we do." It was the earnestness of his reply that got me. I would hope those kids earned themselves a sandal to the head. One girl from my high school got breast implants for her 18th birthday. Her mom joined her as a mother-daughter bonding activity, followed by the daughter getting a brand new $90,000 Mercedes as a high school graduation gift. I work for a dentist and her son is a spoiled brat. He was at the office one day because she had to bring him to an appointment later that day. He got bored and went out wandering around some of the local shops. He came back a little while later and without any preamble walked up to her and said, "Give me $80. She asked him what it was for and he just repeated himself and she gave it to him. That kid's going to have major issues in life later on with that kind of attitude. This is pretty tame, but it's what I got. I used to work as an after-school babysitter for a loaded doctor couple with 2 kids. My job was mainly to pick up the younger kid from school and hang out till his parents got home. He was a good kid, but coddled and immature. He was in 5th or 6th grade at this point. Oftentimes he would not be at his classroom when I came to get him, and the school campus was huge. Different buildings, courtyards, playgrounds, the works. If he wasn't at his classroom I had to comb the whole campus, and he was rarely in the same place twice. He had a cell phone, but usually ignored its existence except for playing games on it in the car. The school was in the city and I had to park on the street. A couple of times I wound up with parking tickets because, despite having stuffed the meter with enough quarters to presumably result in ample time, the search for my charge would take much longer than anticipated. After a point, I mentioned this to him, calmly asking that he respect my time and stay in a set location so that I don't end up with a $25 ticket again. He looked at me with a good-natured shrug and said, "Well, that's not much. You can afford that. Sonny, your parents paid me $140 a week and I was in college. I know you live in a $1.40 million house and your dad buys you an expensive new toy every Sunday, but with the money they're forking over for your education someone ought to have taught you the value of a dollar by now." But honestly, he was a nice kid. They moved away and I hope he's doing well. Should have told his parents. They could have paid your ticket. After all, it's not that much. This kid back in high school was whining, I mean literally whimpering, that he had to wait something like 6 weeks for his custom-built BMW to come over from Germany. If that was me I'd be surprised it only took 6 weeks to custom build a car and ship it from another country. I don't really know anything about cars. That just seems like a short time period to custom build and ship such a large item. I've waited longer than for 99p crap on eBay. Went to HS with this insufferably spoiled kid. Family had a couch in their home's elevator, and classical European sculpture. This was in the US. Kid talked down to about the less fortunate on a regular basis. Once made fun of me for picking a coin up off the ground. What an actual douche he is. A friend of mine inherited a lot of money, enough to buy a house, and he spent it on 2 cars. A Subaru completely modded to Ken Block's version of it and some BMW. Both extremely expensive. We asked him a few months later why he didn't buy a house with it because he still lived with his parents. So he told us that he already owned a penthouse. He just didn't want to move yet. Knew this one guy at my college who didn't understand why everybody is so worked up about student loans. I remember him saying something along the lines of, "Why don't people just pay the tuition up front?" He was also quite sheltered. Just stop being poor, God. I could absolutely survive on my own. My parents just pay for my food and house, but I pay for everything else. If I got a job I could pay for my food and house too. Said at 18, in the middle of a discussion between 2 middle class peers who were talking about saving money because they had to pay for their own college and living expenses. About 5 minutes prior to this conversation, both peers had ordered the cheap dinner options and declined a shopping trip later that night, while rich girl was talking non-stop about buying the best most expensive souvenirs for her friends. Once tried working a regular person retail job and quit within a couple weeks as it just wasn't right and I didn't like it. Reed had actual responsibilities for the first time. Moved cross country for an 8-month education course where her parents pay food, rent, and school. They also gave her a debit card which replenishes up to $500 when it hits $50. She still posts Snapchats with captions of that broke person life over pictures of her getting Starbucks every day, and insists she could survive on her own. Constantly suggests the most expensive options for meals, activities, etc. and tax on things like we can just split the bill. I know you're saving but it's just amount at least $50. You'll be fine, right? Then gets upset when people can't afford to spend time with her, or when someone dares to suggest that she helps cover costs. Friend got a theater with an arcade built over their family's 12-car garage. Parents didn't want the 5-year-old sister to be jealous, so they hired an architect to design and build her a fully functioning playhouse with a bathroom, AC, and bedroom. Just the tip of the iceberg with this family though. Update. Lots of comments. I will try to round out the image. And for what it's worth, no, neither I nor my family is rich. We just lived really close to the family and my dad and mother became close friends with them. They were on the whole really nice and innocent people drunken on the spoils of wealth. I can say I genuinely love the family. Firstly, one commenter was correct. This is not really rich kid syndrome. And no, these are not normal rich people. These are ultra rich, probably richer now than they were then. For example, George Bush Jr. visited the family's house to hold a fundraiser for his second campaign. This was not a typical rich family. Their father built a mini racetrack for his Lotus Esprits at his lake house. Also built a mega yacht with a garage for what most of us would consider a large boat on it. Surprise. He never really used it more than once or twice. An impulse purchase. The house, more aptly called a castle, was filled with game from African safaris taken in the 70s and 80s. The wife bought a popular fast food franchise unavailable in our area because she didn't like having to drive 30 minutes to get what she wanted. Once when I was swimming in the waterfall pool with the son, my mom called and reminded them I need to be home for some sports event or something, and we hopped in their Bentley dripping wet. It was the first time my feet ever touched a fur floor in a car, soaking wet at that. At the Millennium, the father was into tattoos and regularly spent tens of thousands to fly the best tattoo artists in world and from Japan and LA to work on his Yakuza style sash tattoo. I could go on and on, but the number one thing that I think might qualify one in the family for rich kid syndrome is that the father, who inherited his family business from his father, sold the business overseas in the late 80s. The company was the only reason the town had to exist. Ever since, the community has been recognized as the most depressed in the state, and the schools unequivocally the worst. Who the frick has a 12-car garage? My fiance's cousin. He managed to crash 4 cars while still in high school because his father would replace them. When he moved on to college, he got kicked out of several apartments for owning a dog when they weren't permitted. He told me he didn't care though, since his father also funded his continuous stream of new housing. From what I last heard, his father is now paying for his long-standing C habit. Someone's sister got $600 shoes so the parents got the other kid shoes of the same price to stop their complaining. Holy crap. Somehow this is the one that got me. I wouldn't say rich kid but definitely spoiled brat who thought he was rich. Befriended him in 5th grade over our interest in the UGR trading card game. First time I hung out at his place I noticed just how littered with stuff his room was. Some even unopened. I showed him some rare card that I had recently pulled from a pack. He got super jealous and angry that I wouldn't trade or sell it to him. He immediately got up and walked over to the family computer and booted up a site where you could buy cards and various other toys and such. Completely ignoring having me over, he's now on an online shopping spree adding stuff to the cart. After adding a few things he yells where's the credit card and immediately his older sister comes running up the stairs to yell Kyle, Mom said no more buying stuff online and closes the website and shuts off the computer. Kyle then proceeds to have a crying tantrum on the floor and I'm just standing there over him in shock at what's happening and how he's acting. I slowly stopped hanging out with him until completely avoiding him as his temperament got worse. Kid wasn't even rich either if I remember correctly, both of his parents were cops. Babysat some rich kids. A couple gems where when we were watching a movie and she said someone was ugly because they were poor. Another was that they left their stove at the side of the road for hobos. Kid was about 11. Went to school with a crazy rich kid. His parents divorced and each decided to buy his love. Mommy owned a real estate agency, so she got him a license and spoon fed him enough sales for a 6-figure income. The dad then bought him a magazine. Yes, the dad bought a magazine for his 24-year-old cokehead son to run. Worked about as well as you'd imagine. So my best friend's wife teaches at a ritzy $40,000 per year private school. As in, $40,000 a year for elementary and middle school. I think the HS is like $50,000 plus. Well, she teaches 7th or 8th grade. I can't remember. And she said she always goes around the class after the summer break and asks them what they did over the summer, and she particularly remembers one kid complaining about how much his summer sucked because he was stuck on his parents' yacht all summer and they didn't even take it to anywhere cool, just Italy. I know it's an insanely privileged thing to do, but I wouldn't like being stuck on a boat with my parents for a month or two either. This girl would always brag about how she's been to every continent except Antarctica and that she's visited so many countries. Then she wondered why people called her the rich kid and insisted she wasn't rich. To be fair, I am in no way rich yet. I've been to every continent except Antarctica and dozens of countries. You just need to get a job on a cruise ship. Low pay, long stressful hours, but perks like that. I was tossing the football in my friend's place and we almost hit his expensive TV. His response was, "Don't worry, my dad will just buy me another one." Luckily the only rich kids I knew were the most outstandingly well-behaved boys I've ever met. I was a youth leader in a ministry for middle schoolers, and I think the worst it ever got was them being mildly disruptive at times. But these kids had a literal half-sized basketball court in their basement, along with a basement the size of a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment, an arcade, a fully stocked second fridge. Don't even get me started on the house itself and the yard. This place easily would list at least as $1 million home. But they would share with all the kids in the group and never ever look down on anyone for not having money like them. These boys even helped me change a flat tire on my car because they felt it was useful to know how. They literally could probably afford a tow truck and a tire repair all in the same day if it ever happened to them. They were so well grounded that it made me feel like I was the spoiled brat at times. We know parents like that. They're rich, like large multiple wing house with pool, jacuzzi, etc. But the kids are so down to earth. They have after school jobs to save up college money. They're kind and respectful. I'm not even sure they're aware of how rich they are. I've seen this Aussie guy in a Thai pub on Koh Samui. He wanted to show bar girls that he's rich and lit up his cigarette using a burning 1,000 baht bill. He probably did not know how Thais love their king, and that the king just recently died, and his face is on the bill. The rich kid got his butt kicked so hard. Sorry for my English, but hopefully you can understand what I mean. One of my friend's friends ended up paying for a night out food and entertainment. He'd go up before we got the bill and just pay. No matter how much we argued with him and tried to pay him back, wouldn't take it. Nice dude, mad bulla rich. Why don't you just get a pass to Disney and Universal? The people at my school TBH cannot fathom having multiple spiders in their house in a week. Well, obviously you need to release spiders in their homes. Adrian Broner, a boxer, though he was not born rich but became rich in his 20s. If you are not going by what Felix Dennis considers rich, he was supposed to be the next boxing superstar but was beaten badly and exposed. He put out a video of him in line at Walmart. He paid with a $100 bill and threw the change on the ground, saying he is ab and only deals in 100s. This is a man who had 7 children by 8 women at 23, 6 years ago, and who knows how many now. He had to settle a $1 million jewelry debt earlier this year. 8 children by 7 women. Diego Maradona, hold my C. My friend literally throws away his change because he hates holding coins. Doesn't matter if it's 99 cents, he'll throw it away. That crap adds up. In middle school we were asked to draw our homes for some assignment and hand it in at the end of class. A popular, extremely wealthy kid that sat behind me raised his hand and smugly asked the teacher for another sheet of paper because he couldn't draw it all on one page. His friends just snickered, but I was cringing. Even at 12 I remember thinking it was such a snobby thing to say. I had a girl like that in French class high school. We had to draw and label our house floor plan in francaise, and Kat raised her hand and asks how many floors because she kind of lives in a mansion. For other purposes Kat was pretty cool, but she bragged about her wealth a lot. I work at a country club, and on the 4th of July, while I was working, a little girl asked why we were closing at 7 instead of staying open all night. I told her I wanted to get to do sparklers and fireworks with my family too. She thought about it, looked back at me and said, but you all aren't real people. I just had to laugh and inform her I was indeed real and all my coworkers weren't just the slaves of the country club. Wild man. I used to think that I was the only real person and the other people in life just weren't, I guess. When I was around 6, it was whack, and I don't know how the heck I had that mentality. Maybe this girl was the same. Bragging is one of my pet peeves. There's a coworker that constantly brags of how her mom buys her purses, nails, and hair done. The coworker makes decent money. Why can't she buy her own and stop mooching bragging? Or just enjoy it without bragging? What about Gat Dallas kid who killed those others in a drunken car wreck, then used the "I'm too rich for consequences" defense? Or that kid from Baylor who raped a girl and only got expelled? If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.